Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 was directed by David Yates and was released in 2011. And in this movie, it is the epic conclusion in the Harry Potter universe as Harry has his final confrontation with Voldemort in the Battle of Hogwarts. We're at the conclusion of the Harry Potter movies. What a long, strange journey it's been. We've been through the good, we've been through the bad, and now we are here at the final movie. I remember the hype this movie had. It felt like yesterday that the Deathly Hallows Part 2 was being released. This was Endgame before Endgame. I remember everybody was talking about Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, and I had such a blast. My theater crowd was insane for this movie, and now it's nice to look at this movie from an adult eyes perspective after rereading all of the books and seeing this movie again for the first time in maybe, 4 years I've seen this movie, so it was nice to refresh my memory on the nostalgia, and let's see if it still holds up. Well, starting off with the positives for Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, I really appreciate David Yates and his crew for giving this movie that final feel, like feeling like this truly is the finale. No loose ends, everything's tied up into a pretty bow. No matter how sloppily we got to the finish line, we got to the finish line. So I do appreciate David Yates for giving us an epic conclusion. I do feel that this movie does hold up. It really has that final feel to it. There's a really good execution from beginning to end, and it does make it a very enjoyable movie. The stakes were really high in this. You know, I know in the beginning of the Harry Potter movies, you always felt like, oh, everything's good in the end. But because every movie got darker and darker and darker, you never really felt safe anymore. You truly felt in this movie that your favorite characters were in danger. It's crazy to say this, but this movie is 11 years old. Wow, I feel so old saying that, but technology changes every day, and the fact that this movie still holds up is really cool because look, the amount of CGI technology that's changing all the time, I am happy to say that the VFX, all the CGI, the action sequences, they still hold up, even though, it's only 11 years old. That doesn't seem that long, but to us, that feels like a decade ago. I mean, yesterday feels like a year ago. But no, this movie does definitely hold up. The action scenes are very enjoyable, and like I said, it does have that high-stakes feel. Probably my favorite action sequence in this movie was the invasion of Gringotts when they're trying to steal the cup and destroy it with the sword. I really like that because the dragon is super cool, the fire is awesome, the action sequences, the dueling, the dragon bursting through the roof and them escaping. Such a adrenaline-filled sequence of action. And the only thing I didn't like about the scene, if I'm being picky here, is Harry in the books knew Griphook was eventually going to betray him. He was like, okay, let me just try and get the job done as quick as possible before he can betray us. But in the movies, he felt really betrayed by it. And I just feel like that's a testament to these movies not making Harry as intelligent as he was in the books. The biggest positive of this movie is, of course, Severus Snape. He truly becomes the heart and soul of this movie. And it's all because of Alan Rickman, his fantastic performance. He really does give the performance of a lifetime. Now, I know some people are kind of upset at the Snape memories because they're not truly accurate as they were in the book. Because if you don't know, in the book, in Snape's memories, there's a reason why him and Lily fell out of being friends. It's because he called her a mudblood, and he was regretful about it, but Lily was like, look, I'm done with your behavior, so I'm done, I'm canceling you out. I get that. I can understand why people want to show that, to show how flawed of a human he was, and that he was just as responsible for Lily not being his friend as James was. But to me, I'm okay with it simply because Snape in the movies is different than Snape in the books. In the books, Snape is way worse in terms of a personality. He's way more toxic, he's a lot meaner, a lot nastier, hence why it makes sense why, as a youthful kid, he still was super rude and mean, even to somebody like Lily, who he loves. But in the movies, Snape was more of like that strict teacher that, low-key had a heart of gold. He just gave off that vibe. Until, obviously, he killed Dumbledore. But to me, the Snapes, while similar, were also very different. You just never felt like Snape was going to call somebody a mudblood. He never gave off that vibe. But in the books, he absolutely gave off that vibe. Hence why, in one, I believe it was Half-Blood Prince, or what was it? It was Half-Blood Prince or Order of the Phoenix, where Draco calls Hermione a mudblood in class, and Snape just goes, all right, whatever. I'm like, see, that's the condoning. But because we never saw that in the movies, it wouldn't make sense to add that. But the memories themselves are very well executed. The most emotional part of the movie, except maybe the epilogue. But I still remember in the theater when he said always, oh, the emotion, the tears that were spilling in the theater. It like flooded the entire theater. That's how much people were crying. I mean, how can you not get emotional when he says always in that Alan Rickman delivery? Always. Oh, gets me every time. Chills. Chills every time. This movie really solidified Snape as not only the best character in the Harry Potter universe, but one of the best characters in all of cinema. As much crap as I've given these movies and David Yates for not involving Ginny enough, I do appreciate her being more in the forefront in this movie. In the second half of the book, she is barely in it at all. Their relationship is barely talked about at all, which really bothered me because of all the buildup from Half-Blood Prince. You would think a lot of the focus would be on the relationship somewhat, but what I love about the movies is that they don't care how young she is in terms of the battle. Because in the book, they were like, okay, Ginny, you can't really come to the battle because you're underage, so you just stay on back. And naturally, knowing Ginny's personality, she is of course going to be upset about that. But of course, in the movies, it makes more sense because, you know, it's a fight to the death. Literally, the fate of the world is in their hands. So it doesn't matter how old people are. It's like, yo, Ginny, we need all hands on deck. And I do appreciate that big fight feel. I also love the Forbidden Forest scene right before he meets with Voldemort when he uses the Resurrection Stone to see his parents, Sirius, Remus. That was also one of the most emotional moments in the movie. And one of the most emotional moments in all of the entire series. It was incredible. Daniel Radcliffe put on one of the best performances he has ever done. God, he was so good as Harry Potter. If I could, I would give you a standing ovation, but again, my head would be cut off, so I'm not going to do that, Daniel Radcliffe, so I'll give you a sitting ovation, but just consider it a standing ovation. Alright, now let's go to the mixed aspects of this movie. Everything to do with Neville. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Neville in this movie. He is badass, he is so cool, he's doing one-liners, he has that big rah-rah speech, and he kills Nagini. Amazing, I love it. But honestly, from a movie perspective, it makes no sense, and this is where I bring back the argument of this is what happens when you don't properly flesh out your side characters as much as your main characters. This is why, again, the books are better, simply because they flesh out the characters more. I love Neville Longbottom in the books, one of the best characters in the entire series, but it makes no sense how in the movies, for the first 7 movies, he is honestly pretty useless. Like, you barely get to see him at all. But then all of a sudden in this movie, he is super involved. It's like he's always been a big leader, and he's leading the charge in the Battle of Hogwarts. That doesn't make sense. In the books, it makes sense, because Harry tells him, kill the snake, but all of a sudden he knew in the movie, oh, I need to kill the snake with the sword. It's just a lot of inconsistencies there. Again, I'm not criticizing the movie for how they utilize Neville. I'm criticizing the rest of the movies for how they decided to utilize Neville. The second thing, if I'm being very nitpicky on the mixed aspect, is the epilogue. Now, don't hate me. Let me tell you why. I do love the epilogue. It's a very emotional moment. I remember how emotional I was when I saw the epilogue in theaters, but it's not as detailed as it was in the book. I'm sorry, you get to hear about Remus's son, you get to hear more about all the other kids, but because, again, you focus so much on the main 3, you really only focus on the main 3. And look, I get it, I'm not going to be too angry about it, hence why it's in my mixed aspect, but I just would have loved it if they kind of fleshed out the epilogue just a little bit more. And now to the negatives. The biggest one's Voldemort. I'm sorry. I have said this since the 4th movie. Ralph Fiennes was not a good Lord Voldemort. I'm sorry. Don't get me wrong. His meme ability is fantastic. I mean, the slap. You were right. The laugh. And of course, that delivery. It's just not good. I just don't get how you can read the books and then watch the movies and just come away with the fact that, yeah, he was a good Voldemort. I'm sorry, he truly was not the character in my opinion. Now, as much as I do love the action sequences, they do leave a lot to be desired in terms of side characters. A lot of the action sequences involve Harry, but in the books, everybody's involved. You can see McGonagall more in action. You get to see Hagrid and Grawp beat up a lot of people. You only see Hagrid for like, what, 3-4 minutes, and I'm being generous? That sucks. He is one of the most important characters in the series, and you barely use him in the final movie, and Grawp is nowhere to be found. I don't think we've even seen Grawp since the 5th movie, which, again, is so mind-boggling why you wouldn't use that character. Maybe it was the budget thing, but come on, how cool would it have been To see Grop fighting the other giants, trying to assert himself, trying to defend Hogwarts while Hagrid is also fighting, that would have been so cool. Why didn't they do that? And now let's talk about another big negative. The final battle between Harry and Voldemort. Seriously, what the hell was that? In the book, Harry puts on the invisibility cloak after the Forbidden Forest scene. You know when Voldemort was like, the boy who lived, that whole thing, right? So when they go in the Great Hall and everybody's fighting, it's truly is the fight to the death, he has the cloak on and he's secretly casting spells, doing all that cool stuff, and then he epically removes the cloak and he's like, I'm here, Voldemort! And then they have a big final battle in the Great Hall. And everybody was to see it. All the Death Eaters, all the Hogwarts kids, everybody was there to see Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort go at it. And Harry, to the masses, revealed that no, it's not your wand. The Elder Wand doesn't respond to you. And oh, by the way, Snape betrayed you. He never was on your side. He was a double agent. But nope, instead we get them fighting all over the place and Voldemort just straight up slapping Harry and Harry saying, come on, Tom, let's finish it the way we started it. Together. Like that thing, it's cringe. I'm sorry. Compared to the book, this is not what a final battle is supposed to be. I just feel like in the Great Hall with everybody looking at the battle, it really would have been epic. It would have fantastic atmosphere. But honestly, looking at that final battle, it is kind of bland. Another huge negative for me is the scene in King's Cross. After Harry dies and it's revealed that he's the other Horcrux, he meets Dumbledore. And Dumbledore finally reveals why he acted the way he acted. Because again, they didn't mention this in the first movie, but Harry slowly starts to realize that Dumbledore was not the person that he thought he was. Dumbledore kind of was a jerk back in the day. He was very power hungry. That's just how he was. And it shattered this image that Harry, and it shattered our image of what Dumbledore was. We kind of didn't want to believe it. But then once Dumbledore reveals to Harry about how vulnerable he was and how power hungry he was, it was very emotional. We still love Dumbledore at the end of the day. But it just showed how flawed of a character he was. He wasn't this almighty wall that couldn't be broken. No, he clearly is a human like the rest of us. And that was such an impactful scene. But of course, they didn't have any of that. They didn't, right? Right, David Yates? Because it wasn't that important, right? Just tear my heart out, David Yates. Just do that. Just do that. Just tear out my heart. Just go ahead. Do it. And yet again, I must say this. The supporting characters just left out. There were so many epic scenes that could have been used that weren't. For instance, does nobody care that Remus and Tonks died? In the books, I was mortified because Remus was one of my favorite characters. I love Tonks and died. In the movie, you don't see them die. Nobody is surrounded or sad by their death. They're just laying there dead. Fred laying there dead. You don't even get to see his death scene as you did in the books. You didn't get to see Percy reunite with the Weasleys, telling his boss, hey, I quit. Screw you. I'm going to be with my family. You don't get to see any of that. Again, ripping my heart out and just running it over with a car, aren't you, David Yates? Look, putting my book bias aside, let me try and separate book and movie. I am one of those fans that can separate enjoyment. I can have book enjoyment and also have movie enjoyment, unless, it's super egregious in terms of not faithfully adapting from the book. Not involving Dobby, just almost the entirety of Half-Blood Prince, that whole disaster. But look, as a movie, this is still a very fantastic conclusion. I don't even know if that's a word. Is it a word? It is a word in my universe. Very fantastic. That's a phrase in my world. It is a very fantastic conclusion for the series. So as a movie, I'm giving Deathly Hallows Part 2 an A. But as a book adaptation, they leave out a lot of things. But I will say they do keep the core of the adaptation of the book I do think they keep it. For Half-Blood Prince, I think they really left out the heart and soul of that book. But to me, Deathly Hallows Part 2, the movie, they understood how to get to the end. They sloppily got to the end, but they got to the end. So for me, in terms of adapting the book, I am going to give it a B+. That's just how I see it. You may disagree with me. I know as the movies went on, they got worse and worse and worse in terms of adapting the book and being faithful to the book. But I do think for the most part, this is actually one of the more faithful adaptations from the book. So I do appreciate them just concluding this movie in the best way possible. This is still one of the best conclusions in all of trilogies and franchises. You know, some franchises or TV shows have terrible endings. This didn't. Because the conclusion was so good, we still look at the Harry Potter series as beloved as it is. Hence why we got that 20-year reunion on HBO Max. Hence why there's still movies coming out that suck, and there's going to be more movies that come out that are not going to be as good, but we're still going to watch it. Why? Because we love Harry Potter. Before I ramble on anymore, as a movie, it gets an A. Book adaptation, B+. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.